I wanted to give a special thank you for little sweet Marin as she helped light the candles this morning. Was that her first time, Nathan? First time. It's outstanding. Well, her mom helped a little bit. She's hit the Triple Crown now. She's ushered, she's helped with communion, and now acolyting. Can she do the crucifix next week? Okay. Start working out, Tom. We can help her. Well, we are going to need a bigger table. How many of you remember eating in the school cafeteria? Okay. When it came, actually, excuse me, that's the second one. Did you remember the one table where all the cool people hung out? Now, when it came to the cool table, there was one rule. If you weren't cool, you do not sit there. A sub-rule is you did not even walk in that direction. And in a sub-rule, you did not even think about sitting there. Were you ever banned from a table like that? Or maybe you were one of the cool kids. Did you ever ban someone from sitting with you? And if you did, it's been a while and you are forgiven. But being excluded from a table, especially when all you want to do is eat and maybe have some fellowship, is never fun. It can be a horrible experience, especially when you are a young person. So why am I bringing up these cool table memories? Because we have a cool kids table situation in our gospel lesson. In researching this passage, I came across some fascinating information from scholar and theologian N.T. Wright and others who made some interesting information available. First, in that culture, houses were divided into spaces. You had male spaces and female spaces. And we still do that today with the man cave and the she shed and, of course, the kids' rooms. But getting back to that particular culture, just like there were specific men and women spaces, men and women had specific roles. The public room was the man space. Guess where the women were? You got it. The kitchen and any other space that could not be seen by the guests. I do not want to see any husband writing any of these notes down, okay? Don't want you to get in trouble. We actually see this play out in the first lesson with Abraham and Sarah when the three strangers come. Women were not allowed to be in the same room as the men. And in fact, the only places where men and women could be together was outside or at nighttime if they shared the bedroom. So women were not allowed in the same room as men, and they were not allowed the same access to the guest of honor, such as a famous rabbi. And they certainly were not allowed to sit at the feet of the rabbi. So women were not welcome at the cool table. But guess where Mary is? She's invading the man cave. Hey, there's a woman here, said probably many men that day, and I guarantee many, if not all, the disciples. We know that they were quite the grumblers and the mumblers. But to make things worse, at least in the eyes of the men, is where Mary is sitting. Not just within the man cave, but she is sitting at the feet of Jesus. Now, this place, this particular seat, was a place for a man. Sitting at the feet was where a man, a student, would listen and learn from his teacher. It also meant that one day that student would want to become a rabbi as well. To use the image from earlier, this particular seat was the best seat at the cool kids table. This was the place to be if you were part of the in crowd, or in this case, the school of Jesus. This is where Mary sits. Mary has crossed the line. This might explain why Martha commands Jesus to tell Mary to get up and help with the party. I've always loved that interaction where Martha does not ask Jesus, she tells Jesus to help her with Mary. Because what Mary is doing is certainly going to make Martha, the host of the party, look really bad. The horror, the scandal. I mean, there were rules. There were cool table rules. And Mary is breaking all of them. Surely someone, if not all the men, would be asking, who does she think she is? But it does not matter what they think about the situation. What matters is what Jesus thinks and does. At this point, let me remind you about Luke chapter 10, where our gospel comes from. Chapter 10 opens with the expansion of the Jesus mission. The mission goes from 12 disciples to 70, and the 70 go on tour spreading the good news, healing people, casting out demons, bringing people to God. And then we get the story of the Good Samaritan just last week, where Jesus makes a Samaritan the hero of the story. The Samaritan, a sworn enemy of the Jewish people, now has a place in the Jesus mission. And now, look at what Jesus does not do. Jesus does not rebuke Mary and gets her to leave. Instead, Jesus rebukes Martha. By that, I mean he corrects her. He redirects her. Mary is not doing the wrong thing. She is doing the right thing. And it's the only thing that matters. And that is to pay attention and listen to Jesus. While Martha is working hard to be a great host for everyone at the party, her attention is not on Jesus. To defend Martha, I guarantee you that she wanted to listen to Jesus, but she was so caught up in the urgency of being a good host because that mattered in society. If you were a good to great host, people would think well of you. If you were not, your place in society would dwindle. But what was even more important than Martha's social standing was Martha's spiritual standing, or in this case, spiritual sitting, and that is to sit next to God. Rather than this being a moment where Jesus affirms the cool kids table, Jesus affirms Mary, and the table gets bigger. The table gets bigger. But really, the table gets bigger in our story from Genesis. In our story, the strangers acknowledge Sarah's presence and her contribution to the meal. Again, men were under no obligation to acknowledge the work, the service of women. And yet Sarah is not unknown. The strangers know the role Sarah has played. Abraham hosted and Sarah prepared. The table gets bigger because of their acknowledgement. And the table for Abraham and Sarah continues to get a little bit bigger with the baby on the way. And yes, God's table does have high chairs. So, we are going to need a bigger table. A bigger table where all are welcomed, all are served, and all feel the same sense of community and call. And that is what the world needs right now. This world needs a church, a community that is making God's table longer and not shorter. This world needs a church, a community that is not playing musical chairs and taking chairs away, but a church that is adding chairs so more people can sit and be a part of the Lord's feast. For the words and titles we have made that separate us are thrown away for good. As Paul writes in our passage from Colossians, "And you who were once estranged and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, Christ has now reconciled in his fleshly body through death, so as to present you holy and blameless and irreproachable before him." Irreproachable, as Jesus said Mary's place was set. Jesus has made us holy. He has made us blameless, and he has made all of us a guest at his table. And that table still exists today. Jamie, can you move away from me and focus on the altar? The table still exists today. It is the table that we come to each and every week, and we receive the sacrament of grace and mercy and love. And this table is open to all of us. You do not need to fill out a questionnaire or go through some kind of system like at the airport to find out if you are worthy enough to be at God's table. Because the table is open and there are no barriers. And my hope is that the table, our table, God's table, is filled with people of different ethnicities, different sexual identities, different political parties, different economic classes, just different from one another. That's my hope and that's my vision. And I know that that's what Jesus would want. And at this table, you do not have to be cool because you have been called by Jesus. You have been called a child of God. And that makes you cool enough. Amen.